You are listening to Radio Data, a podcasting radio where we talk about data, cloud, analytics, and AI with different guests, different hosts, and in different segments. This segment is called Data Update because here we share up-to-date news from the data community or our knowledge by describing topics that we find very interesting. Today, I would like to describe 5 trends in the data and AI landscape that we have recently noticed. If you are interested in what they are, please continue listening. In this podcast episode, I would like to describe 5 trends in the data and AI landscape. Those are the trends that I see in my daily work as a CEO at auditingData, where we work with almost 30 different customers on various big data projects. I also spent a lot of time in the big data community. For example, I was one of the organizers of Big Data Tech Warsaw conference that was scheduled in April this year, 2022. And a few months ago, I took part in the selection process called Call for Presentations. In this selection process, we reviewed a large number of submitted presentations and decided which of them will be included in the agenda or not. So hopefully this gave me more data points to study the current trends that I see in the community. Well, I'm aware that of course Big Data Tech Warsaw is not the largest data conference on that planet, and we didn't have speakers representing from all companies, from all industries, but still the scale of our conference can give us some insights. Anyway, to give you some numbers, this year we had over 40 presentations and 14 roundtable discussions. They were presented or moderated by over 70 speakers. Plus we had additional 40 submissions to the call for presentations process that were finally not included in the agenda. But speaking about the trends, first of all, I see that AI and ML is now visible everywhere, in every sector, including advertising, healthcare, education, finance, automotive, public transport, manufacturing, security, and unfortunately or not, government. I guess that each company on this planet is asking the question, what AI can do for my business? And in many cases, companies find quite good answers. However, based on the content of our conference and also the news that I see and projects that we work at auditingData, I see that e-commerce and especially retail becomes one of the hottest sectors for AI and ML. At our conference in Warsaw, we actually had so many presentations about data from global players such as Shopify, Zalando, eBay, and also from local retailers such as ICA Gruppen, which is one of the largest supermarket chains in Sweden, as far as I know, or from e-commerce marketplace such as Allegro, which is the largest e-commerce marketplace here in Poland and currently more successful here than Amazon. So let's take a look at the retail industry from the data and AI perspective. Why is the retail industry so hot, in my opinion? Well, in my opinion, it's hot for many different reasons. First of all, in this sector, you can analyze many different types of quite useful data. For instance, in finance, you focus on time series data. Or in media companies, you focus mainly on clickstream events. But in the retail, you have almost everything. Clickstream, plain text, images, voices, and videos. This is because the interactions with customers happen in many different places. In online world, with the website or mobile app, or in physical stores with real cashiers or smart hardware, and often using text with chatbots or voice when you speak to some other bots. And you can also include Metaverse or Multiverse as one of their data sources. For instance, today we have smart mirrors that can recommend clothes for you, and you can see how you look in them in your room. But tomorrow you can probably do much more in the metaverse, and this will also generate a lot of complex real-time data. The different types of data, of course, requires defining and implementing a good omni-channel strategy and customer journey so that you can later leverage this data for many business use cases. This brings me to the second reason. There are many different interesting use cases for analytics at retail industry. There are different units such as logistics, delivery, customer support, and use cases such as dynamic product pricing, product recommendations, where you can apply data analytics and a lot of domain knowledge. You will also find across unit use cases such as forecasting, and having many different data sources and many different units at large company also introduces complexity. And such a complexity might require the adoption of concepts like data mesh or similar to make sure that the data is properly collected, accessed, and analyzed. So this is really interesting that the retail industry is exposed to a lot of different challenges, complexity, and this requires that sector to use the most innovative solutions and concepts. Of course, the AI that is safe for kids and families will need to meet many regulations that are being introduced now. Sometimes they are called together as responsible AI. The parts of responsible AI can include secure AI, ethical AI, explainable AI, or interpretable machine learning. This is also the trend that I see that companies and data scientists are talking more and more often. But also on the other hand, it will introduce some barriers to entry for smaller companies that will have to put more resources to comply with all regulations and responsibilities, especially if they don't have already their own legal teams. Large companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, they have already their own legal teams, so it's easier for them to comply with those new regulations. To summarize the first trend, I simply believe that the retail industry will significantly increase its use of data and analytics because there are many new business use cases that will be implemented in that sector, and there will be much more data used to drive their business, and this data will have many different forms such as video or voice that requires advanced AI to efficiently process this data. The second trend that I would like to describe in this podcast is the fact that the companies are building new type of data platforms that are easier to use for their employees. This type of platform is often called as modern data platform. But what is modern actually about them is the fact that they use quite new technologies such as Snowflake, dbt, Fivetran or Airbyte. What is old about them is the fact that they support SQL as the main data processing language. People in the big data community often say that tools and technologies change very fast, but SQL is always here to stay. And SQL doesn't only stay here, but also it grows its adoption. We see companies that have hard time recruiting Python, Java or Scala engineers so that they build their big data solutions with SQL interface only and choose not to use Spark, Flink, and use Snowflake or BigQuery for everything, including ETL, analytics, and data science. According to my knowledge, this way of working introduced a new role called analytics engineer. The implication of this trend is that the entry barrier for people to work with data will be lower because there will be easier to use new tools and technologies, and SQL will be enough to learn to efficiently analyze data and build the whole pipelines. This also means that new skills will be in demand. For example, you would like to hire creative people who are able to ask right questions about your data, your users, and your business, because very often they will be also able to find the answers to those questions by themselves using SQL or BI tools without the need of asking other engineers to implement complex code in Python or Scala. However, there are still companies that can attract Python, Java, or Scala engineers, such as Shopify, Zalando, CrowdStrike, or auditingData, that presented at our conference this year. All of them use public clouds, such as AWS or GCP, but they decided to include many open source technologies in their stack, such as Kafka, Iceberg, Spark, Trino, or Flink. And it turns out that if your company has necessary competences, has own DevOps team, and some scale, it might be beneficial to take advantage of managing some open source technologies in the cloud by yourself. When speaking about the cloud, the third trend is actually the public cloud. It's of course quite obvious trend, but it has accelerated during the last 2 years, especially when the COVID-19 pandemic started. And today, all the innovation happens in the cloud so that all data-driven companies migrate there or even start in the cloud from day one. This year we had a number of startups presenting at our conference, and all of them built their data and AI solutions in the public cloud. One of them is Willa, a Swedish fintech that builds its data analytics platform on top of GCP, and they use many cloud managed technologies to add MLOps and BI capabilities to it. A second interesting example is IQVIA, an international healthcare company that has migrated to the cloud and faces many interesting challenges there. They are building a unified global platform for processing electronic medical records. However, data governance and data residency is a very important requirement for them, and it impacts their data platform architecture in significant way. So in other words, they would love to build as unified solution as possible, but they need to take into account many local requirements regarding data privacy, data security, and data governance that are often different in different countries or in different regions like Europe, US, or Asia. The fourth trend is the development of data quality and data auditing solutions for your data ingestion and data processing pipelines, so that you make sure that you know what data you actually ingest or what data you use for further analytics, and you can be sure that your data has a good quality. Those topics were actually covered by presentations given by Shopify, ADOC, or CrowdStrike at our conference, and we also implement them with our customers at Getting Data. Chances are that there are still many data-driven companies that process a lot of garbage because it's actually not that easy to build efficient data auditing solution. By data auditing, I mean to make sure that your data is complete, that you have collected all data that belongs to a particular interval, such as day, for instance, or you don't have duplicates after some crash. However, more and more companies are aware of such challenges. They build in-house solutions to help them to put more trust in their data, or sometimes they are using some commercial products that are developed by third parties in the cloud. Let's move on to the last, fifth trend that I would like to describe here, and this is about data access. Today, companies have more and more data, and for this reason, new tools for data cataloging and data discovery are developed and introduced. For example, Marquez, Amundsen, Google Data Catalog, or DataKin. Also, new concepts for data access and data ownership are proposed, such as data mesh. And data mesh is a very interesting concept. The main principle of it is to distribute the data ownership to the domain-specific teams that manage, own, and serve the data as a product. I will not be talking much here about the data mesh because soon I will record a new episode of our podcast with Max Schulze from Zalando, who will explain the concept of data mesh and describe how it was introduced at Zalando. But in the meantime, of course, you can find a lot of information about data mesh in the internet or at conferences, but still I encourage you to listen our new podcast episode about data mesh soon. I would like to conclude this podcast episode with a few ideas how you can actually follow those trends. First of all, use the public cloud because this is where the innovation happens, and if you would like to benefit from those innovations, you should simply be there. Of course, when you use public cloud, you don't have to limit yourself only to products that cloud providers such as Google, Microsoft, or Amazon offer, but you can also explore many good open source projects as they work seamlessly in the cloud, such as Kafka, Flink, Amundsen, Marquez. Also, currently SQL is the main focus for many innovators in the data and AI landscape, so you should definitely have analysts or analytics engineers in your company that use SQL on daily basis because maybe they will be able to simplify your data ingestion and data processing pipelines with modern technologies and SQL interface. Regarding the data ingestion, I would recommend you to do an exercise. So please try to ingest new type of data source into your data lake and ask other people at your company to actually try to use that data. This way, you can check how easy or how difficult for you is to bring more data to your platform, whether your platform is actually easy to extend to ingest new data sources, and whether it's easy for your colleagues to understand and discover this new data, and whether this data is actually automatically validated or audited, or the quality is checked. Last but not least, look at the data mesh to check if this gives you some interesting inspiration or interesting ideas how different teams in your company can work together and share the data. This concludes this episode of the podcast. I mentioned 5 trends that I recently noticed in the data and AI landscape. This landscape actually changes very fast because this is the sector with very speed of innovation. There are many new names, concepts or buzzwords that you haven't heard too often a year ago, but today it looks that you hear them everywhere. For example, data mesh, modern data platform, data lakehouse, reverse ETL, AutoML, analytics engineer. Those are just few examples. I'm sure that we will cover most of them in the next episodes of the Radio Data podcasts. Thank you for your listening. If you are interested in new episodes of Radio Data, please follow us on Acast, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms. Also visit gettingdata.com to find more information about other ways that we gather and share the knowledge.